A bomb cyclone unleashes torrential rain and significant lake effect snows over the next 48 hours, followed by Arctic air for the plains and Ohio Valley. And out west, moisture surges onto the coast this coming weekend. All this and more next at the Weather Farm. Welcome to the Weather Farm. We have a lot to talk about a major system that is set to impact the eastern half of the United States as we begin our Wednesday. So let's dive right into the details, and we are going to walk you step by step through every phase of this forecast, starting with our surface map, taking you up through the upper levels, down to the surface, and we're going to point out all the significant weather events that is involved with this particular system. As we start our Wednesday, we are going to see an area of low pressure that is going to be centered in West Virginia. Out ahead of it, we're going to have heavy rain spreading all the way from Maine down through Georgia into the panhandle of Florida. On the backside, where the colder air has filtered in as a result of that Arctic front passing late Wednesday night into early Thursday, in parts of eastern Kentucky and northeastern Tennessee, we could see a brief period of significantly heavy snow. 1 to 2 inches of snow is not out of the question for areas with isolated 3 to 4 inch amounts possible on our Wednesday. Up across the Great Lakes, as we have that counterclockwise motion and that air coming from the northwest, we're going to see lake effect snows for parts of Wisconsin into the upper parts of Michigan, as well as into parts of Quebec. And out west, we do have another low across parts of Montana and a little bit of snow in the Rocky Mountains that's going to be impacting our Wednesday. By the time we get into Thursday, that low pressure has made its way from West Virginia all the way up into Canada and has deepened to a 972 millibar low. This is as we wake up Thursday morning. We see tight area and heavy snowfall falling across parts of Quebec into Newfoundland. Out ahead of it, we do see some rain into southern Newfoundland and the Canadian Maritimes. And we have the large lake effect snow machines in effect. Down with winds coming across Lake Erie, the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, all those favorable snow belts are going to have significant lake effect snow as we move into our Thursday. Out west, we see moisture making its way onto shore for parts of California and Oregon with a low that is sitting offshore. In those higher mountain elevations, we will see snow piling up. We could easily see 12 to 18 inches on our Thursday. The rest of the country remains quiet. However, it is under the influence of that Arctic air that has sagged its way into the Great Lakes and all the way to the East Coast for our Thursday. Thursday will be the coldest day of the entire week for most of the eastern half of the United States. So let's jump back to our system and let's look at each stage of its development. As we start with our jet stream Wednesday morning, we see that it is deepening. Out ahead of it, we have a jet streak that's going to bring high winds in those upper levels of the atmosphere. We see that jet stream being negatively tilted as we move into our Wednesday. Here we see it again starting Wednesday, and we see that negative tilt starting to form here. This gives us an indication that, and with the jet streak out ahead of it, this storm is strengthening, and that's one thing that we're going to keep our eye on as we move through the day. I want to take you to another map here to give you a little bit closer idea of what's going on with this particular system. This is the 500 millibar level map. This tells us the winds that are about 18,000 feet up in the air. We see these yellows. This is indications of winds that are in excess of 110 to 120 knots at that particular level. We see the wind here very geostrophic. And what we mean by geostrophic winds is this winds at this level follow the direction of the isobars. So these black lines, the geostrophic winds are not affected by friction, so we're not worried about tall buildings. And here in the east, the mountains of the Appalachians do not reach up this high, so we're not worried about any friction from the mountains. And the Coriolis effect does balance out so that the winds do follow the direction of the pressure gradients. So we see that here. We see the wind barbs pretty much pointing in the same direction that these pressure lines are. And the tighter that these lines get, the more intense that we're going to see winds here. So we see that here down across parts of South Carolina. And because of these strong winds, they have a greater chance of making it all the way down to the surface and impacting the surface winds on our Wednesday. So now let's take a look at those surface winds here, because this is another key. As we look at this map, we saw that those wind lines on the 500 millibar line were generally going from southeast to northeast in that direction. Here at the surface, we have winds out of the northwest or out of the north. So what that tells us is that they're moving in two different directions. And when we have winds that are moving in two different directions, we can get shear happening. And that's what, whenever they move in different directions, they start to rotate just a little bit. Or the storm can get a little bit of rotation. We get updrafts to build those thunderstorms. We're going to see that primarily in parts of the Carolinas into southern Virginia. So that's the area where we see the greatest wind at 500 millibars, and we see the most directionally different winds with this particular system. So we're going to keep our eye on our Wednesday for the possibility of severe weather and an isolated tornado in this part of the country for our Wednesday. The winds are going to gust, and they're going to get stronger. Here we have 40 and 50 mile per hour gusts getting into Massachusetts or Connecticut, Massachusetts. We're even seeing 60 mile per hour and 70 mile per hour gusts out on the Cape Islands. So by Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday night, we're going to pay attention to Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and the Cape, because that is where we're going to see some significantly strong winds. 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts are likely. And as you see these gold colors forming, that's an indication of winds 70 to 80 miles per hour, hurricane strength force winds just offshore. If this storm just tracks just a little bit further west on our Wednesday, some of those winds could come on shore. So we're going to watch for significant damage due to wind across this area for our Wednesday. Let's put our map into motion. We have a 1,000 millibar low. Now I want you to watch this. It's 1,003. It's dropped to 997, 994. As it continues to move up, what we're looking for bombogenesis or a bomb cyclone is a dropping of 25 millibars. Here it's at 977, 972 by 7 a.m. on Thursday. So from Wednesday at 7 a.m. to Thursday at 7 a.m., it's gone from 1,003 millibars to 972 millibars. That fits the definition of a bomb cyclone, where the pressure has dropped greater than 25 millibars of pressure in a 24-hour period. The reason because this, we saw in the jet streak, we saw that strong jet streak, winds 170 to 180 knots at the highest levels of the atmosphere. At the 500 millibar level, we saw those winds 100 to 120 knots. And at the surface, we saw winds 60 to 70 miles per hour. We saw that negative tilt of the jet stream as well. This storm is strengthening as it makes its way north. It's going to pull moisture off of the Atlantic Ocean, bringing heavy rain. Behind it, where the cold air has wrapped in, we're going to see snowfall for parts of Pennsylvania into New York, into Vermont and New Hampshire. But the heaviest snows are going to fall here in Quebec. And as this low pressure gets up here by Hudson Bay, it's going to have that counterclockwise rotation. And Hudson Bay is still relatively warm, at least the southern tip of it is. So it's going to pull some moisture and give some more lake effect snow for parts of Quebec this coming weekend. So by the time we get to our Thursday morning, we are looking at a wide swath of 1 to 2, possibly as high as 3 inches of rain from Pennsylvania into New York, into Long Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, into New Hampshire, and even far southern parts of Maine. We're going to see 1 to 2 inches of precipitation just west of that area. A lot of that, especially as we get here closer to the lakes, may fall in the form of snowfall, where that colder air is able to wrap in. We look a little bit further south here, across the southeast. We're going to see that continuation of that 2 to 3 inches across the Carolinas. Parts of northeastern Georgia and far western South Carolina could be targeted for 4 to 6 inches of precipitation, in addition to what they've already received earlier this week. So this is going to be an area that we're going to be focused on for potential for flooding as we get into our Wednesday and our Thursday. In terms of snowfall, we're going to see generally, again, 1 to 2 inches across eastern Kentucky and eastern Tennessee, higher amounts throughout the Appalachian, those higher elevations into West Virginia, Pennsylvania. You could see a general 1 to 2 inches, but it's going to be off of the lake effect where we see the greatest accumulations of snow. And as we look into the northeast, by the time we get to Thursday morning, we see a general 8 to 12 inches off of the lakes here in far western New York and then up near north central New York. We see significantly heavier snows across parts of Quebec as that low pressure is centered just east of the Hudson Bay. 12 to 18 inches of snow are likely. But this storm is not going to end on Thursday. We're going to continue to see its effects. It's going to continue to spin, and it's going to continue, those northwesterly winds are going to continue to crank up the lake effect snow machines. So by the time we get to Sunday afternoon, we could see widespread 12 to 18 inches, maybe even 24 inches here in parts of New York, into Quebec, and up farther north just east of the Hudson Bay. As we look at the Midwest, by the time that low has moved its way into east of the Hudson Bay, we're going to see significant lake effect snows here for places like Traverse City, far northern parts of Michigan, the UP. Widespread 12 inches plus of snow will be common in these areas. Even down into Grand Rapids, you could see 2 to 4 inches, maybe isolated 5 to 7 inch amounts as well. And then far northeastern Ohio as well, off of Lake Erie. As we take this map into our Sunday, those lake effect snow machines are going to continue. We could end up with somewhere 18 to 24 inches in northern Michigan. Where exactly, still to be determined. A lot depends on that wind direction. Where does that wind, how does it get a good fetch off of the lakes to transport that moisture? We could also see it in the Upper Peninsula, another 18 to 24 inches. The snowfall that you see in Illinois, into Iowa, moving into Indiana, this is going to be the byproduct of a system that's going to move out of the Rockies later this week, and we're going to talk about that later in this video. So as we look at the 500 millibar chart, here's the deep trough on our Wednesday. It starts to eject to the north and east as we move into our Thursday. And out west, we see a ridging trying to build in. It's weak at best. We have a lot of zonal flow, moderating temperatures as we move towards our Friday. We look at another system moving onshore to California. It's going to try to establish, but the ridging continues to build across the eastern half of the United States for this coming weekend. Temperatures here 20 to 30 degrees above normal. We see this cutoff low kind of meandering across the northern plains into the upper Great Lakes as we end the weekend, but behind it there's more ridging in place. And so this is going to set the pattern for much warmer than normal temperatures across most of the United States as we get into the early parts of the third week of December. But we see by the 17th, we see a trough digging onshore, moving in down into the Four Corners region. This could be the first hint of a pattern change. I want to jump into put our maps into motion here, put everything together. Here's our storm again, making its way up the eastern half of the United States into Canada for our Wednesday. We watch this low that it's going to eject out of the Rockies into Kansas, and it's going to bring precipitation as we get into our Friday across parts of Iowa, into Illinois, and Indiana. We start to see the warm air lifting, interacting with the cold air. That low ejects out. So we're going to see precipitation moving mainly in the form of rain, but on the north end of it, we could have some significant snows. Behind it, another high pressure. Behind it, we see moisture continuing to come on shore for the west coast, bringing heavy rains down in the lower elevations and significant snows for those higher elevations. As that ridging builds across the central plains this weekend, all the storm systems are going to have to go up and over that ridge. So we're going to see lows that come on shore go up into Canada and up over the ridge as we begin next week. So let's take a look at our high temperatures. So in the wake of that Arctic air as it's made its way through the northern plains into the Great Lakes on our Tuesday, behind it on our Wednesday, we're going to see sub-zero temperatures for a good part of North Dakota into northern Minnesota, single digits into South Dakota and to Wisconsin. That colder air is going to make its way south, while out east, we're going to have along the coast 50s and 60s. Boston, you could be flirting with the mid-60s as those strong southwesterly winds fuel warmer temperatures into your area. But just behind it, we're going to see temperatures in the 30s and 40s. This is why I say it's primarily going to be a rain event, except on the backside where we can get that cold air to move in. So if this storm system does wobble a little to the east or a little to the west, that will have a big impact on what kind of precipitation that we see in that area. Across Texas, we see temperatures in the 60s, and out west, we see seasonal temperatures. We do see cooler temperatures along the coast where rain is moving onshore. As we go into our Thursday night or Wednesday night into Thursday morning, this is what we believe to be the coldest night for the next several days. We're going to see widespread sub-zero temperatures across the upper plains. Some areas of North Dakota approaching 20 degrees below zero for actual temperatures. Parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba can be approaching 30 below zero. That cold air is going to make its way all the way down into northern Georgia and to northern Alabama. We can see sub-freezing and hard freezes in this area. This is an area we're going to watch for temperatures. In the wake of that system, in the Arctic front making its way through the northeast, temperatures are going to fall into the teens and 20s as well as we begin our Thursday morning. And we're not going to recover much on our Thursday. We're still going to see sub-zero highs across parts of the upper plains, teens and 20s over a good chunk of the United States. The real warmth is going to be down in South Texas, where you're going to be in the low to mid 70s, and in the desert Southwest, where you're going to be in the low to mid 70s as well. We see seasonal temperatures for most of the western half of the United States, and that does carry over into our Friday, where we do see a slight moderating trend. Instead of sub-zero, we're going to see teens and 20s in the upper plains. We're going to see near 80-degree temperatures in parts of Texas, except in the northeast, where we're going to see that snowfall off the lakes and that colder air still in place due to that storm system still impacting the area up here just east of the Hudson Bay. This is Friday night around midnight into Saturday morning. As I mentioned, we're going to see a low pressure that's going to eject out of the Rockies, move across Kansas on Friday, and it'll be about near Kansas City by midnight Friday night. If we see these blue height contours and these red height contours, what we see is that across parts of Iowa, we're going to see, depending how much warm air can work its way in, again, if you remember, these are spinning counterclockwise, so we're going to get ahead of the low, we're going to get a southerly component that's going to bring some warm air into this system. If that 540 line moves far enough north and keeps all the precipitation rain across Iowa, that will be good. But this particular model wants to hint at a significant icing event for the northern half of Iowa. There's going to be enough cold air in the wake of the high pressure that's centered over New York that we're going to have some low-level cold air at the surface. But in the upper levels, we're going to start to get in some warmer environments. So we could have a significant icing event here. Just to the north across parts of southeastern South Dakota and southern Minnesota, we expect it to all stay as snow. But in this area, we're going to watch for widespread power outages and heavy limbs, especially if this mixes in with a heavier wet snow. We could see limbs coming down from the weight of the snow. In terms of total precipitation, we've talked about the significant event out east, but I want to focus on the west because it is here that we're going to see days where we're going to see moisture and systems making their way on shore. So we're going to see in parts of Northern California where they've been relatively dry the last 2 weeks, 4 to 6 inches of rain is likely. We get up into British Columbia, we're going to see higher amounts. And as that system makes its way onshore, we're going to see rain for parts of Nevada into Idaho and eastern and parts of Oregon and Washington as well. In terms of snowfall, we're going to see the highest amounts in the Sierras, 1 to 2 feet is likely, making their way into parts of Idaho and into near Yellowstone. 8 to 12 inches of snow are likely by the time Sunday morning. Here across British Columbia, 3 to 4 feet of snow by Sunday morning is likely. And when all is said and done, when that low pressure finally makes its way off into the Atlantic and up towards Greenland, we could see just east of Hudson Bay, we could see snow amounts 24 to 30 inches of snow for parts of northern Quebec. Most of Quebec will see 12 to 24 inches of snow by the time this system wraps down on Sunday morning. But if you look here in the United States in those favored lake effect snow bands, again, this is where we would expect 18 to 24 inches of additional snow by the time we reach Sunday morning. And our temperature outlook, as we approach the holiday in the middle of December 25th, this takes us out to the 24th of December. Much of the country under the influence of above normal temperatures for that time period. I will let you know, as we saw from that 500 millibar map, there was this low and this trough that was digging out of California around the 18th and 19th, making its way to the Four Corners. As each model run continues to take us further past the 25th and into the 26th and leading us toward New Year's Day, we're seeing some tweaks in the models from run to run as we get toward the 25th and the 26th. Earlier today, we saw models not really hinting at any kind of organized system or storm for the morning of the, no organized system, no organized storm for the morning of the 25th. In the models that we've seen overnight, we're now starting to see something happen anywhere from, depending on the model you look at, the GFS, anywhere from the Dakotas into the Minnesota, the Ohio Valley, even the Tennessee Valley, or even the Northeast. All of these areas are now looking to maybe have something in play as we get to the 24th, 25th, 26th. Something to stay on top of. We will keep you updated with the latest information. We hope you've enjoyed your time here at the Weather Farm. We hope you found this video important. Please share this video with your friends and your family. The numerous impacts across the Northeast, the snow, the potential icing situation across Iowa on Friday night into Saturday morning, the storms that are going to impact and bring heavy rain across the West Coast. This is information to be shared with your friends and family. Subscribe below, hit the bell notification icon so you can be notified of when we have the latest information and new information to share with you here at the Weather Farm. Have a great day, and we hope to see you soon.